Sylvia had never seen anyone move like him, silent, deliberate, and impossibly tense, until the night she walked past Jerry's driveway and felt the air shift. He was leaning against the black steel gate, eyes sharp as a predator's, watching her every step, yet he didn't move. The street was quiet, almost too quiet, and Sylvia realized her pulse was racing, not from the cold but from the awareness that this man Jerry was unlike anyone she had ever met. "I wouldn't walk there if I were you," he said, voice low and measured, each word slicing through the night air. Sylvia froze. Most men she had met never spoke that way, commanding attention without raising their voice. "I'm not afraid of the dark," she replied, forcing steadiness into her tone, though her heartbeat betrayed her. Jerry's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, almost imperceptible, before his eyes darkened. "It's not the dark you should fear." Something primal stirred in Sylvia, a shiver that wasn't just from the cold. She sensed it immediately. This man, this billionaire recluse she had only glimpsed in passing during the day, held a secret so dangerous it thrummed beneath his skin. And somehow she felt drawn to it. "Hi family, do you know getting a script and images, even having to work on voiceovers can be so draining? And that's why I need you to subscribe to my channel to give me the push I need to keep going. It's sincerely not easy, but I am sure your subscription and watch will help me keep going. Thank you so much. Let us continue." Earlier that day, Sylvia had arrived in the city, seeking distance from her past, a place where no one knew her name. She had expected quiet streets, the hum of normal life, perhaps the occasional neighbor waving hello. She had not expected him, the man who radiated wealth and danger in equal measure, the man whose presence alone demanded attention, whose eyes seemed to pierce through her calm exterior and reach straight into her thoughts. Jerry straightened, as if sensing her racing curiosity. "I've seen you around," he said casually, but there was nothing casual about it. Every word carried weight, and Sylvia understood in that instant that she was being studied. "You should go inside." Instead, Sylvia took a careful step closer, ignoring the warning in his tone. "And if I don't?" The night seemed to hold its breath. Jerry's gaze sharpened, and for a fleeting moment, Sylvia thought she saw something not quite human flicker across his face. His jaw tightened and he stepped forward, but not aggressively. It was a movement full of control, precise, commanding. A warning and a test all at once. "You will," he said simply before turning and disappearing into the shadows beside his gate, leaving her with a lingering sense that she had just brushed against something dangerous. Sylvia's instinct screamed at her to run, to retreat into the safety of her apartment. But curiosity anchored her feet. Something about Jerry unsettled her in a way she had never experienced, a combination of fear, fascination, and an unexplainable pull toward the unknown. He was a puzzle she couldn't resist, a danger wrapped in elegance and secrets. She retraced her steps, trying to make sense of the encounter. Jerry wasn't just a man, she could feel it deep in her bones, he was something else entirely. She had glimpsed strength and control, but also an undercurrent of wildness, something untamed that seemed to vibrate in the air around him. It terrified her, but it also made her want to know him more. By the time she reached her apartment, Sylvia's mind was racing. She didn't know why, but she felt as if her life had shifted the moment she saw him. The quiet neighborhood, the faint hum of streetlights, the whispering trees, they all felt charged, alive, as though the world itself was aware of Jerry. And for the first time in her life, Sylvia realized she wasn't walking alone anymore. Someone, or something, was already moving alongside her, watching, waiting. Something in her chest twisted. She knew she was in over her head, but she didn't care. Sylvia didn't sleep that night. Every time her eyelids threatened to close, the image of Jerry's sharp, unreadable eyes flashed in her mind. The way he had studied her, the subtle control in his movements, and that fleeting, almost inhuman flicker across his face, it refused to leave her. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering why a man she had barely spoken 2 sentences to could stir something so potent inside her. By the faint gray light of dawn, Sylvia had made a decision. She needed to know more. Not out of recklessness but out of necessity, something about him demanded understanding. And she couldn't ignore it. The next morning she found herself outside her apartment, pretending a casual stroll, but her eyes kept drifting toward Jerry's driveway. The black SUV was gone, but the faint hum of activity suggested he was somewhere nearby. It was impossible to shake the feeling that he was aware of her presence even before she had left her door. And then she saw it. A glint of movement from the side of his property, subtle enough that anyone else might have missed it. Jerry appeared, carrying a crate of technology equipment, his posture precise, almost surgical. He didn't notice her at first, and yet Sylvia could swear he somehow sensed her. There was a tension in the air, a silent acknowledgement that they were both aware of the other, even across the quiet street. Sylvia took a careful step forward. She wanted answers, but she wasn't sure what questions to ask. Instead, she watched. Jerry placed the crate down and paused, scanning the horizon as if expecting someone, or something. The muscles in his jaw tensed, his fingers curling slightly as he flexed his hands. He looked every bit the composed billionaire in daylight, yet there was a restless energy beneath the surface, a coiled strength that seemed barely contained. Sylvia's curiosity deepened. Whatever this man was, he was guarding it fiercely. By mid-morning she had decided to take a more deliberate approach. She crossed the street, letting her presence be known, yet keeping her distance. Jerry's eyes flicked to her immediately, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink to the space between them. "You're persistent," he said, his tone smooth but edged with warning. "I noticed," Sylvia replied evenly, refusing to look away. "You're hard to ignore." He studied her carefully, expression unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. "Curiosity can be dangerous." Sylvia's pulse quickened. "And yet you didn't run when you saw me staring." A shadow of something passed over his face. Amusement, maybe, or approval. "No," he said finally, voice low. "But be careful. Some things shouldn't be looked at too closely." It was both a warning and a challenge. Sylvia couldn't tell which she feared more. Over the next few days, her curiosity spiraled. She began observing him without being noticed, paying attention to the patterns of his life. Every night, he would leave at seemingly random hours, returning in the early morning with the same silent precision. Some nights, the faintest hint of a scent, metallic, wild, lingered in the air near his property, something primal that she couldn't identify. She even noticed subtle interactions with animals nearby. Birds avoided him entirely, and stray cats would skitter away, ears flat, whenever he passed. It was unsettling and yet fascinating. Sylvia felt a magnetic pull toward him she couldn't rationalize, an instinctive understanding that his life contained layers she couldn't begin to imagine. One evening, unable to resist, she ventured closer to the edge of his property, where the low iron fence cast long shadows across the ground. She thought she was being careful, but as she peered through the gap, she saw him shift, not a full transformation, but a tension in his body, a predatory grace that made her stomach tighten. Jerry's head turned sharply toward her, and for a moment, his eyes glinted with an intensity that made her step back in surprise. He didn't speak. He didn't move closer. He simply held her gaze, and Sylvia felt as if he were measuring her, testing her, weighing her resolve against his own instincts. She realized then that whatever drew her to him, whatever dangerous fascination lingered in the air between them, it was mutual. That night, Sylvia lay awake, mind racing with questions she had no answers for. Who was Jerry really? Why did he feel so untamed yet controlled? Why did she feel both drawn to and wary of him at the same time? And most importantly, why couldn't she stop thinking about him, even when the rational part of her mind screamed to walk away? Her curiosity had been sparked, and there was no going back. Something about him demanded attention, demanded exploration, and Sylvia felt the thrill of danger curling through her veins. She didn't know it yet, but this was the first step into a life far more complicated, and far more dangerous, than she could have imagined. By the end of the week, she noticed the subtle details, scars hidden beneath sleeves, movements that were sharper than normal human reflexes, the faintest traces of something primal in his aura. Each observation deepened her curiosity, her fascination, and her sense that the quiet neighborhood held secrets far darker than streetlights could illuminate. Sylvia knew one thing with certainty: Jerry was no ordinary man, and she was already too invested to turn back. The night had a different edge that evening, sharper, charged, as if the air itself was warning her. Sylvia couldn't sleep. Her thoughts kept returning to Jerry, the man who had haunted her days and her curiosity-laden nights. The pull she felt toward him had grown into a restless ache, an obsession that whispered she needed to see him again. Not in daylight, when he was merely a billionaire neighbor with impeccable posture and precise movements, but at night, when the shadows clung to him and the unknown stirred just beneath the surface. She found herself walking again, taking the same path past his driveway. The street was deserted, the silence deep and suffocating in its intensity. Every step she took made her senses hyper-aware, the faint rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the whisper of the wind through the trees. And then she saw him. Jerry was standing at the edge of the property line, his silhouette outlined against the dim light of the lamppost. At first he seemed calm, but as her gaze lingered, she noticed subtle, unsettling changes. His stance was too precise, too controlled, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. His muscles twitched with a restrained tension, and the faintest glint of something sharp, claws maybe, caught the light. Sylvia froze, breath catching in her throat. This was no ordinary man. And then a sound, a low growl, slipped from his throat, quiet, almost imperceptible, yet it vibrated in her chest. Her heart pounded violently, but instead of fleeing she stepped closer, drawn by a dangerous curiosity she could neither explain nor resist. Jerry's head snapped toward her, eyes locking with hers, blazing in the dim light. The air between them became electric, thick with an unspoken warning. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice deeper, rougher than before, carrying a resonance that seemed to stir something primal within her. "I couldn't stay away," Sylvia admitted, her voice trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the overwhelming awareness of how alive he made her feel. "I needed to see." For a heartbeat, the world stilled. Jerry's gaze darkened, and she could see the raw, untamed edge in him, the wolf beneath the man. His chest rose with controlled breaths, his movements fluid and deliberate, a dangerous grace that made her pulse spike. And then, almost impossibly, he transformed. Not fully, not yet, but enough. His eyes glowed faintly amber in the dim light, his body shifting subtly, muscles coiling and stretching with unnatural precision. His fingers elongated slightly, claws glinting, and a low, guttural growl rumbled in his throat. Sylvia stumbled back instinctively, fear and fascination twisting together in a confusing swirl. Jerry's lips curved, not a smile but a recognition. "I warned you," he said, voice a mixture of menace and care. "Curiosity can be deadly." But he didn't move closer to harm her. Instead, his presence loomed, overwhelming yet strangely protective. He was a predator, yes, but a controlled one. Every instinct screamed at him to be cautious around her, to protect her without fully revealing the beast inside. Sylvia realized, with a jolt, that she had never encountered danger and allure so intertwined. Her fear began to dissolve into a strange exhilaration. Her pulse raced, her senses heightened. She could smell the wildness clinging to him, the metallic scent of raw power, the faint trace of musk that was undeniably human, yet undeniably animal. Her body responded in ways that frightened her almost as much as his transformation did. Jerry stepped closer, just a fraction, his movement measured, deliberate. "You shouldn't do this," he said again, softer this time, almost a plea. "It's not safe for you. Not just the night, not just me." Sylvia's curiosity burned hotter. "I can't stay away," she whispered. "I need to understand you." For a moment, his wolfish instincts wrestled with the human part of him. He wanted to protect her, to push her away, to keep her out of danger, but the pull between them was undeniable. He exhaled slowly, and the tension in his posture eased slightly. "Then you need to promise me something," he said. "Whatever happens, whatever you see tonight, you trust me." Sylvia nodded, swallowing hard. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. "I trust you." For a fleeting instant, the predator in him relaxed and Jerry's eyes softened, human, vulnerable, dangerous all at once. The night held its breath around them, the quiet street transformed into a stage for the impossible. Sylvia understood then that nothing about Jerry was ordinary, nothing about this night would be forgotten, and nothing about him would ever let her go. The first close encounter had left her mesmerized, terrified, and undeniably hooked. She had glimpsed the wolf beneath the billionaire's calm surface, and now there was no turning back. The days after that night were unbearable for Sylvia. She found herself replaying the encounter over and over, the amber glow of Jerry's eyes, the subtle shift in his form, the quiet tension that had left her both terrified and exhilarated. She had never been this drawn to anyone before, and it frightened her. Yet something told her she couldn't simply walk away. She needed answers, answers that only Jerry could provide. Her first attempt came unexpectedly. She saw him one afternoon while leaving her apartment for a late errand. He was leaning against his SUV, inspecting a set of blueprints that suggested construction or engineering work, though it was impossible to tell for certain. He was still impeccably dressed, calm, deliberate, and utterly untouchable. Sylvia's heart beat faster than she'd like to admit. She hesitated, then forced herself to approach him. "Jerry," she called, her voice steady despite the nervous twist in her stomach. He looked up slowly, and for a brief moment the intensity in his eyes softened. Not fully human, not fully wolf, but something in between. "Sylvia," he acknowledged. There was a pause, a calculated weighing of her presence. "I wasn't expecting to see you today. I need to understand, Sylvia said, choosing her words with care. Whatever you are, whatever you hide. I need to know. Jerry's lips curved, almost imperceptibly. He studied her for several seconds, his eyes scanning her face as though measuring her resolve. Then finally he spoke. Some things, he said, voice low, deliberate, are not meant to be uncovered by curiosity alone. Sylvia's breath caught. I'm not leaving. Not until I understand. A long silence stretched between them, the kind that held both challenge and tension. Jerry finally gestured toward the back of his property. Fine, he said. But you need to follow exactly what I say. One misstep and this curiosity of yours will get you hurt. You need to be careful, very careful. Her pulse raced, but she nodded. The edge of fear was thrilling, and Sylvia felt it sharpening her senses, making her alert to every subtle motion, every shifting shadow. He led her behind his property, where a dense line of trees shadowed a secluded yard. It was here, in this hidden corner, that Sylvia began to see the truth of his double life. The crates she had seen him moving weren't just mundane technology, they contained equipment that suggested surveillance, tracking, and protection. Complex devices that monitored movement, sound, even temperature, hinting at some kind of secret vigilance. Why all this? She asked softly. Jerry's jaw tightened, and he glanced around as if the trees themselves might be listening. I protect things most people don't even realize exist. People. Creatures. Secrets. Sylvia's curiosity deepened. Creatures. He gave her a slow, measured look, his amber eyes flashing with something unreadable. Not everything that walks this world is human. And some of it, he said, voice dropping to a whisper, needs a hand to keep it in balance. Including me. The words sent a chill through her, but she refused to retreat. She needed to know more. She wanted to understand the man who had fascinated her, terrified her, and drawn her in with a single glance. He moved closer, his presence almost overwhelming. You've already seen enough to realize I'm different, he said. But what you don't understand is the control it takes to walk among humans, to maintain a life that looks ordinary, even when nothing about me is ordinary. Sylvia nodded, absorbing the weight of his confession. There was a raw honesty in his words, though not everything was revealed. It was enough to make her realize how dangerous he was, and how much she wanted to stay close to him anyway. Jerry finally relaxed slightly, as though acknowledging her acceptance without fully lowering his guard. The world I live in, he continued, is not one most people are prepared to enter. But somehow, you've chosen to step into it anyway. That is not insignificant. Sylvia's chest tightened, her curiosity sharpened by both fear and fascination. This was a man who lived in shadows, who straddled lines she couldn't fully comprehend, yet somehow she felt the first thread of trust forming between them. By the time she left that evening, the city lights seemed dimmer, the streets quieter, as if the world had contracted around her and Jerry's secrets. She knew one truth with clarity. The man she thought she was observing as a neighbor was far more complex, dangerous, and compelling than she had ever imagined. And now, knowing fragments of the truth, she could no longer turn away. The veil had lifted, if only slightly, and Sylvia understood that every step she took from now on would be deeper into a world of shadows, secrets, and a man who was as enthralling as he was lethal. Jerry had revealed part of himself, but the rest remained hidden, a mystery she was determined to unravel. And she knew, with unshakable certainty, that curiosity had only just begun to spark. Sylvia's days had become a restless blur. Every quiet street corner, every shadowed alley seemed to pulse with the memory of Jerry, his amber eyes, the taut muscles she had glimpsed, and the sense of danger that clung to him like a second skin. She told herself it was curiosity that drew her, but deep down she knew it was something far more insidious. A dangerous attraction she couldn't ignore, one that made her pulse spike and her breath catch in the middle of mundane tasks. She found herself wandering near his property again, this time under the guise of taking an evening walk. The air was crisp, carrying the faint metallic scent of autumn leaves and something else she couldn't quite name. A sharp, wild scent that reminded her of her encounter under the moon. Jerry was there as if he had been waiting. His silhouette emerged from the shadows, every movement controlled yet fluid, precise, predatory. He didn't speak at first. He simply watched her approach, the tension between them taut and palpable. You shouldn't be here, he said finally, low and deliberate, but there was a softness underneath, a vulnerability that contradicted the danger in his gaze. Sylvia stopped, heart hammering in her chest. I know, she admitted, but I can't stay away. I want to understand you. His jaw tightened, and for a fleeting second, The predator inside him stirred, coiling, restrained yet hungry. "Understanding comes at a price," he murmured. "You're playing with forces you can't even begin to imagine." Sylvia's lips pressed together, fighting back the tremor of excitement and fear. "I don't care," she whispered. "I want to see it all. The real you." The tension between them shifted subtly. He stepped closer, each movement deliberate, the distance shrinking to a mere breath. She could feel the heat radiating from him, the controlled power in his muscles, the barely contained energy that spoke of danger and dominance. Sylvia's instincts screamed to step back, yet every part of her body urged her forward. "You're reckless," he said, tone low, almost a growl, and it sent a shiver down her spine. "But I can't," he paused, breaking off mid-sentence, eyes flickering with conflict. She met his gaze, heart racing. "Can't what?" she asked softly. "Afford to let you get too close," he finished finally, voice tight with restraint. "It's not just your curiosity that puts you in danger. It's everything you touch, everything you learn. You don't know what you're stepping into." Sylvia swallowed hard. The danger in his words should have made her flee. It should have made her run the opposite direction and never look back. But it didn't. Instead, it ignited something she couldn't resist. Something thrilling, terrifying, and undeniably magnetic. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the night stretching around them, charged with energy neither could ignore. She felt drawn to him in a way that defied reason, drawn to the danger he represented, to the shadowed edges of his world that were forbidden yet intoxicating. Jerry's hand twitched as if resisting the urge to reach for her, to close the distance completely. His amber eyes darkened, and Sylvia caught a glimpse of the duality within him, the controlled human billionaire and the wild, untamed predator lurking just beneath the surface. It made her pulse race and her breath hitch. "You don't understand," he said finally, voice tight with tension. "One mistake, one misstep, and this attraction, this," he gestured vaguely between them, "could destroy you." "I don't care," Sylvia whispered again, almost daring him, almost challenging him. "I want it. I want you. I want all of it." The words hung in the air, heavy and charged, and for the first time, Jerry allowed himself a flicker of surrender, not complete, but enough to reveal the human vulnerability beneath his predator instincts. His eyes softened for just a moment, and Sylvia felt it like a physical touch, warming her from the inside out. Then the night shifted. A low growl echoed from somewhere beyond the trees, a reminder that danger was never far. Jerry tensed immediately, instinct snapping to attention. His body moved with a predatory grace, scanning the surroundings, every sense alert. Sylvia realized then that attraction and danger were inseparable in him, that every step closer to him brought risk, but also exhilaration she couldn't ignore. When he finally relaxed again, it was just slightly, enough to glance at her with that conflicted intensity that had haunted her dreams since their first encounter. "Be careful," he murmured. "This, between us, is dangerous." Sylvia smiled faintly, a mix of defiance and desire. "I know. But I can't stay away." The tension lingered, unresolved, an invisible tether pulling them closer, promising both danger and something far more intoxicating. The night had revealed more than attraction. It had revealed a bond, dangerous and magnetic, that neither of them could deny. Sylvia turned back toward her apartment, each step heavy with anticipation. She knew one thing with certainty: the dangerous attraction between them had only just begun, and there was no turning back. The first sign of trouble came silently, almost imperceptibly. Sylvia had been trying to push thoughts of Jerry out of her mind, telling herself that curiosity was enough for now. But the city had a way of whispering its secrets, and shadows rarely stayed empty for long. That evening, as she walked along the quiet street leading to her apartment, she felt it, a presence lurking in the periphery, deliberate and watchful. Her pulse quickened. It wasn't the usual thrill she felt when thinking about Jerry, it was sharper, colder, tinged with danger. She slowed her steps, instinctively glancing over her shoulder. The street was empty, save for the faint outline of a figure lingering near a lamppost. Before she could react, movement to her left caught her eye. A man stepped forward from the shadows, tall, broad, and unfamiliar. His expression was unreadable, but his intent was clear. He had been waiting. Sylvia's instincts screamed, and she pivoted instinctively, just as a shadow darker than the night itself fell over the street. Jerry appeared, silent, fluid, every step calculated, every muscle coiled like a predator about to strike. The man who had followed her didn't notice him until it was too late. "You shouldn't be here," Jerry said, low and dangerous, stepping between Sylvia and the stranger. There was no hesitation in his voice, only authority, power, and a subtle undertone of warning that made her stomach tighten. The stranger's eyes flicked toward him and a smirk twisted his face. "You're the one they warned me about," he said, voice laced with challenge. "Thought you could hide from the people who know your secrets?" Jerry's posture didn't waver. "I don't hide," he replied evenly. "I protect." Something in Sylvia's gut tightened. Words couldn't describe the raw, almost feral intensity in Jerry's movements. Every motion was deliberate, precise, and the air around him seemed charged with a threat that belonged not to a man, but to something else entirely. Sylvia realized with sudden clarity that the danger surrounding Jerry wasn't just his own secret. It was someone or something from outside, someone who knew enough to hurt him and by extension, anyone close to him. The stranger lunged and in an instant Jerry moved. Not with haste, not with chaos, but with a terrifying elegance. Sylvia could hardly keep her eyes on him as he intercepted the attack, his hands moving with almost unnatural precision. The moment was brief, violent, yet controlled. In those seconds she caught glimpses of him, his speed, his reflexes, the way he seemed to anticipate danger before it arrived. The stranger faltered, and Jerry's amber eyes met Sylvia's across the small distance. "Stay behind me," he said, voice firm but calm. There was a subtle edge, a warning she could feel deep in her chest. Sylvia obeyed instinctively, stepping back as adrenaline surged through her. Within moments, the intruder retreated, disappearing into the shadows with a threat hanging in the air. Sylvia's hands trembled as she tried to comprehend what had just happened. She had been terrified, but also captivated. The man who had saved her had been both terrifying and mesmerizing, a perfect storm of control and wildness. Jerry turned toward her then, expression unreadable. "You need to understand," he said slowly, each word deliberate. "The danger isn't over. Not for me, not for you. Being close to me comes with consequences." Sylvia nodded, chest tightening. "I know," she whispered. "But I can't walk away." A faint growl rumbled from somewhere behind him, low and primal. His eyes flicked to the tree line bordering his property, muscles coiling as if ready to spring. Sylvia realized then that Jerry's life was always on the edge, living among humans while guarding something far more dangerous than she had imagined. She stepped closer, compelled despite the fear. "Then let me help you," she said softly. "I want to be part of it. Whatever it is, I can handle it." Jerry's eyes softened for the briefest moment, a flicker of vulnerability buried beneath the predatory intensity. "This isn't a game," he said quietly. "If you step further into my world, there's no turning back." Sylvia felt her heart hammering. She didn't care. She had glimpsed the edge of his world, and now she was drawn to it like a moth to flame. The threat was real. The danger was real. And so was the connection between them, raw, magnetic, and impossible to ignore. That night, as she returned to her apartment, Sylvia realized something terrifying and exhilarating. The world she had chosen to step into was no longer her own. It belonged to Jerry, and to the dangers that stalked him. She had glimpsed the predator, and the thrill of it was impossible to resist. The threat had emerged, but so had something far more dangerous, an attraction entwined with peril, curiosity, and secrets yet to be revealed. The night had never felt heavier. The city lights barely pierced the darkness, and the quiet hum of distant traffic seemed muted, swallowed by the tension that clung to the air. Sylvia walked cautiously toward Jerry's property, her steps echoing softly on the pavement. She could feel the weight of the evening pressing down on her, the lingering adrenaline from the confrontation earlier refusing to dissipate. Jerry was waiting for her near the edge of the trees, his posture relaxed yet alert, as if expecting trouble to surface from every shadow. The amber glow in his eyes had softened slightly, but there was still that sharp intensity that made her pulse hammer. "You shouldn't have come," he said quietly, his voice low but not unkind. There was a note of exasperation there, the tension between caution and desire threading through every syllable. "I had to," Sylvia replied, stepping closer, the cool night air brushing against her skin. "I can't stop thinking about everything. About you. About what you are." Jerry's gaze held hers for a long moment, and then, without warning, he exhaled sharply, tension spilling from his shoulders. "You don't understand what you're stepping into," he admitted. His voice was softer now, tinged with an edge of vulnerability she hadn't heard before. "The life I live, it's not safe. Not for you, not for anyone who gets close." Sylvia's chest tightened, but she refused to retreat. "I don't care," she whispered, the words carrying both defiance and sincerity. "I want to be close. I want to understand even if it's dangerous. Even if I can't control it." For a heartbeat, Jerry said nothing. Then he stepped closer, the space between them charged with electricity. "You have no idea what it's like," he murmured. "To have this other side constantly at war with the human part of me. To want connection, warmth, and yet know that every instinct screams danger. That every time I care, I risk." His words faltered, unspoken fears hanging heavily in the night. Sylvia reached out, her fingers brushing his hand lightly. "I don't care about the risks," she said, steadying her voice even as her heart raced. "I care about you. All of you. If you let me in, I'll face it." He looked at her then, truly looked, and for the first time the walls he had built seemed to tremble. "You don't know what you're asking for," he said, amber eyes glinting in the moonlight. "I've hurt people before. I've lost control before. If I lose control again, I could lose you." Sylvia felt a shiver run through her, not from fear, but from the intensity of his confession. "Then let me face it with you," she said softly. "I'm not afraid." The words hung between them, fragile and daring. Jerry's shoulders eased slightly, the tension in his body relaxing, though not entirely. He closed the distance, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "You're reckless," he whispered, voice low, rough with emotion. "But somehow, I can't resist you. I shouldn't feel this, not with everything I am, but I do." Sylvia's breath hitched, and she felt the magnetic pull of the moment. The danger, the mystery, the wildness in him, all of it coiled together into a force she couldn't escape. "I can't resist you either," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I'm not trying to." For a long moment they simply stood there, suspended in the shadows, the night swallowing them in its quiet intensity. It was more than attraction now, it was trust, vulnerability, and the unspoken acknowledgement that whatever lay ahead, they were bound together by something stronger than fear. Jerry's hand finally covered hers, firm but gentle, anchoring them both. "I shouldn't let this happen," he said, his voice low, almost broken. "But the truth is, I don't want to let it go." Sylvia's pulse raced, and she felt the thrill of the night, of the closeness, of the undeniable tension that neither danger nor logic could break. "Then don't," she said simply, a smile ghosting across her lips. "Not tonight. Not ever." The shadows wrapped around them like a cloak, concealing their confessions from the world, yet magnifying their intensity. In that moment, nothing else existed. The danger, the mystery, the pull of Jerry's untamed self, it all converged, leaving only them raw, honest, and irrevocably connected. The night deepened, and with it their bond solidified. Secrets had been revealed, trust had begun to form, and the dangerous attraction that had simmered between them finally found its first words, its first acknowledgement, and its first fragile promise. And in the shadows, Sylvia knew that this was only the beginning. The morning after their confessions, Sylvia couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over her. The city seemed different now, the streets quieter, the shadows darker. The night with Jerry had left her exhilarated, yes, but also alert, wary, as if some unseen thread had been pulled taut between them, and danger was already winding its way closer. It started subtly. Messages that didn't make sense, fleeting shadows that seemed to follow her, and the constant sensation that she was being watched. At first she tried to dismiss it, blaming nerves, exhaustion, or her imagination. But the feeling only intensified. Then came the first concrete sign. A note slipped under her apartment door and signed, the handwriting sharp and deliberate. "You don't know who you're dealing with. Step away from him." Sylvia's pulse quickened. She had no idea who had sent it, or how they even knew about Jerry. The note made her chest tighten, a mix of fear and determination igniting inside her. She couldn't back down now, not when the stakes were this high. She found herself standing outside Jerry's property later that evening, hoping for answers, hoping to understand the web she had stepped into. The faint glow from his driveway hinted that he was home. She approached cautiously, aware that even the slightest misstep could reveal her presence to someone watching, or worse. Jerry appeared suddenly, emerging from the shadows, his amber eyes sharp and piercing. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low and tense. "I got a warning," Sylvia said, holding the note carefully. "Someone's watching me, warning me to stay away from you." Jerry's expression tightened, jaw rigid. He took the note, reading it quickly, and for the first time, a flicker of something dangerous passed over his face. "They've been tracking you," he said quietly. "And now you've drawn their attention. I should have warned you, but you didn't listen." Sylvia's stomach twisted. "I can't stay away," she admitted. "I don't care about the danger." Jerry's eyes darkened, and the tension between them thickened. "This isn't just danger," he said, voice dropping lower. "This is betrayal." Someone close to me, someone I trusted, has been feeding information to people who want me exposed, vulnerable. Sylvia's heart skipped. Betrayal? Someone in Jerry's life was working against him, and by extension, against her. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could it be a business rival? A family enemy? Or someone from the shadows of his world she hadn't seen yet? Do you think it's someone you know? She asked softly, voice almost a whisper. Jerry didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, magnetic, and dangerous all at once. I don't know yet, he admitted, amber eyes flicking to the darkness around them. But I do know this: trust is fragile in my world. And right now, we can't fully trust anyone. Sylvia felt the tension coil around her, gripping her chest. The intimacy and vulnerability of the night before seemed worlds away. Now there was suspicion, caution, and the heavy knowledge that every step forward could invite disaster. You can't protect me from everything, Sylvia said finally, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. But I want to be here anyway. Even if it means facing betrayal, suspicion, danger. Jerry's gaze softened slightly, a flicker of admiration and reluctant acceptance passing through his eyes. You're reckless, he murmured. And yet, somehow that makes you stronger. But remember this: curiosity and trust are dangerous together. Especially in my world. The tension didn't lift. Shadows seemed to stretch around them, and the faint hint of movement in the trees suggested they were not alone. Jerry's instincts were sharp, coiled like a spring ready to snap. He glanced around, calculating, aware, protective. I'll find out who did this, he said, voice low but unwavering. And anyone who thinks they can come between us will regret it. Sylvia nodded, her pulse still racing, her chest tight. She understood now. Betrayal wasn't just possible, it was inevitable in a world like Jerry's. But she had chosen to step into it anyway, drawn by attraction, curiosity, and something she couldn't explain. As they stood in the shadows, alert and wary, Sylvia realized that their bond would be tested, not by passion alone, but by deception, suspicion, and the invisible hands working against them. Trust had been shattered before it was fully formed, and now they would have to navigate danger together, carefully, relentlessly, and with every instinct on high alert. The night held them both in its quiet tension, reminding Sylvia that love, desire, and trust were always entwined with peril in Jerry's world. And as betrayal whispered through the darkness, she understood that curiosity alone would not be enough to survive the storms ahead. Sylvia hadn't slept all night. The note, the lurking shadows, the whispered betrayals, they had left her restless and hyper-aware, every sound amplified, every shadow suspicious. By dawn, she had made a decision. She wouldn't wait for danger to find her. She would confront it, alongside Jerry. The streets were quiet as she approached his property, the early morning mist curling around the edges of trees like silent sentinels. Jerry was already there, pacing near the backyard, amber eyes scanning every corner with the intensity of a predator who could sense danger before it struck. You shouldn't have come, he said immediately, his voice low and tight with tension. This isn't a request, Sylvia. I know, she replied, stepping closer, ignoring the chill in her chest. But you need me. And I need to help. Jerry paused, studying her, the weight of their unspoken bond and the danger pressing down on them. You don't understand what you're asking for, he said finally. The people who are coming for me, they're not ordinary. They won't hesitate. If you get involved, there's no going back. Sylvia's eyes met his, steady despite the fear. I already stepped in, she said. I'm not stepping out now. For a long moment, he didn't respond, the tension in his posture easing slightly as if acknowledging her resolve. Then he nodded once, sharply. Fine. But we do this my way. One mistake and everything falls apart. They moved quickly, silently, through the shadows behind his property. Sylvia followed Jerry's lead, every step calculated, every movement precise. The city that had seemed ordinary just days ago now felt like a battlefield, streets and alleys transformed into arenas of danger. You need to trust me completely, Jerry said, voice low but firm. If you hesitate, if you act on impulse, it could cost us both. And worse, it could cost lives. Sylvia swallowed hard. I trust you, she said, voice unwavering. But you have to let me be part of it, Jerry. I can't just watch from the sidelines anymore. He gave her a long, measuring look, amber eyes flickering with something she couldn't decipher. Reluctance, concern, something darker. Fine, he said finally. But you follow my instructions. No questions, no delays. They approached the street where the first shadow had appeared days before, the one that had sent Sylvia into this spiral of fear and fascination. Jerry paused, crouching slightly, muscles coiled like a predator ready to strike. He gestured for Sylvia to stay low behind him. "They'll come," he whispered. "And we need to be ready." Minutes stretched into eternity. The wind carried faint noises, footsteps, whispers, the rustle of clothing against pavement. Then, like a ripple through water, movement came. Figures emerging from the shadows, careful, deliberate, testing the perimeter. Jerry moved first. Swift, controlled, precise. He intercepted the nearest figure, disabling them with a combination of brute strength and uncanny reflexes. Sylvia froze at first, her instincts screaming danger, but she remembered his words. "Trust, follow instructions." He gestured sharply. "Now." Sylvia moved, finding an unexpected rhythm beside him, following his lead with precision, her heart pounding, adrenaline sharpening her senses. The attackers were skilled, coordinated, but together she and Jerry formed a wall of strategy, instinct, and raw intensity that even she hadn't anticipated. The fight was short but fierce. Shadows receded, the attackers retreating into the dark alleyways from which they had come, leaving Sylvia and Jerry standing amid the silent street. He exhaled sharply, tension easing from his posture, though the edge in his amber eyes remained. "You did well," he said finally, voice low but carrying approval. "Better than I expected." Sylvia's chest heaved, adrenaline still coursing. "We did it together," she said, a small victorious smile tugging at her lips. Jerry's gaze softened slightly, though the wild, dangerous intensity remained. "This is only the beginning," he warned. "There are more of them and they won't stop. But we make a good team, you and I." Sylvia felt a thrill, equal parts fear and exhilaration. She had stepped fully into his world now, faced danger side by side with him, and survived. The tension between them had shifted. Danger had become a catalyst for connection, trust had deepened under fire, and their attraction had intensified, sharpened by risk. As they stood together in the early morning shadows, Sylvia realized something she couldn't ignore. No matter the threat, no matter the betrayal, she and Jerry were bound together now. Not just by desire, but by necessity, by danger, and by a shared understanding that survival depended on trust, and on each other. The forced alliance had begun. And in a world of shadows, secrets, and predators, it might be the only thing keeping them alive. The moon hung low over the city, casting long, silver shadows across the quiet streets. Sylvia walked beside Jerry, her senses sharp, alert to every sound, every movement. The forced alliance had changed everything. She had witnessed his power, his instincts, and the fierce, unyielding protection he offered. Danger was no longer abstract. It was tangible, ever-present, and yet, somehow, it had drawn them closer. Jerry's amber eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, sharp, commanding, and full of the untamed energy that had haunted her since their first encounter. But tonight there was something different, a quiet acceptance, a transformation that extended beyond the physical. He had begun to let her in, not just into his secrets, but into his world, fully. "We've survived," Sylvia said softly, breaking the silence. Her voice carried more than relief, it carried recognition of the bond forged in fire, in shadows, in danger. "And I understand now. I understand who you are, what you are, and why you've kept me at a distance." Jerry's gaze met hers, intensity giving way to something warmer, more vulnerable. "You've seen me at my edge," he admitted, voice low, husky with emotion. "The predator, the danger, the part of me that doesn't belong to the human world. And yet, you've stayed." "I didn't just stay," Sylvia said firmly, stepping closer. "I chose to. I accept it, all of it. Your world, the danger. I accept it." He exhaled sharply, the tension in his posture easing, but the strength in his presence remained. "Acceptance is one thing," he said. "Transformation, that's another. You're not just stepping into my life, Sylvia. You're stepping into something that will change you, shape you. And there's no going back once it happens." Sylvia's pulse quickened, a mix of anticipation and exhilaration coursing through her veins. "I'm ready," she whispered, her eyes unwavering. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." Jerry stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. The wild, untamed energy that had always surrounded him was now tempered by something softer. Trust, intimacy, and a willingness to share his world. "Then you need to understand one thing," he murmured, amber eyes locked on hers. "This isn't just about me. It's about us. Together we face this. Together we survive. Together we transform." The words sent a thrill through Sylvia. She felt it, the dangerous attraction, the unbreakable bond, and the promise of a life that was no longer ordinary, no longer safe, but utterly alive. Jerry's hand reached for hers, firm, protective, and grounding. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice almost a growl, tinged with the predator she had come to trust and desire. Sylvia nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. "I'm certain. Whatever comes, I'm with you." A low, approving growl rumbled from deep within him, a sound both human and wild. And then, as if the night itself recognized the moment, Jerry shifted. Not fully into his wolf form, but enough. Muscles coiling, amber eyes glowing brighter, aura charged with power and presence. He was the predator, the protector, the man who had captivated her from the very first encounter. Sylvia didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped closer, drawn to the raw energy, the intensity, the man, and the beast, before her. "I accept you," she whispered again. "All of you." Jerry's gaze softened, vulnerability slipping through the controlled exterior he had worn for so long. "And I accept you," he said, voice low, full of emotion. "You've changed me, Sylvia. You've brought something into my world that I didn't know I needed, something human, something fierce, something real." The night held them in its quiet embrace, the city fading into insignificance as the shadows wrapped around them. Danger, mystery, and desire had led them here, through betrayal, suspicion, and survival. And now they stood together, stronger, bound not just by attraction, but by trust, acceptance, and the willingness to face the unknown together. The transformation wasn't just about Jerry anymore. Sylvia felt it too, the way her fear had turned into courage, her curiosity into understanding, her desire into commitment. Together they had faced danger, revealed secrets, and emerged changed. Jerry's hand covered hers fully now, firm and protective, and he leaned closer, amber eyes glowing with a mixture of wildness and devotion. "This is just the beginning," he murmured. "But whatever comes, we face it together." Sylvia smiled, her heart racing, exhilaration and love flooding her senses. "Together?" she echoed. The shadows of the city seemed to bow around them, the night stretching endlessly, as if acknowledging the union of predator and human, of danger and trust, of two lives irrevocably intertwined. In that moment, Sylvia and Jerry accepted not just each other, but the transformation of their world, their bond, and the love that had grown, fierce and unyielding, in the heart of darkness.